The research ship Whispered Dawn floated quietly in the dark space near the edge of the galaxy. Its hull was smooth and white, covered in beautiful patterns that glowed softly in the starlight. The ship looked more like a work of art than a military vessel, which made perfect sense because the crew inside had never known real war. Captain Velthar stood on the bridge, her crystal body catching the light from the control panels. As a Vethka, she was made of living crystal that could think and feel. Her people had been peaceful for thousands of years. War was something they only read about in ancient history books. The archaeological scans are complete, reported Science Officer Zithara, a tall, thin being who looked like he was made of flowing silver water. The Zephyrian's voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The ruins on the fourth planet are definitely from the old builders. They might be over 50,000 years old. Captain Velthar felt excited. Finding ruins from the old builders was like finding treasure. These mysterious people had built amazing cities across the galaxy long ago, then disappeared without a trace. Studying their ruins helped the Galactic Concordat learn about the past. The Galactic Concordat was a peaceful alliance of many different alien species. They shared knowledge, traded goods, and helped each other explore the galaxy. They had been living in harmony for over 1,000 years. Small fights happened sometimes, but nothing serious. Real war was something from the dark old days. Excellent work, Captain Velthar said. Start preparing the artifacts for transport. The museums on Veth Prime will be very excited to see these. As the crew worked, none of them noticed the strange readings on their long-range sensors. Deep in space, something was moving toward them, something very big and very old. Engineering Officer Klixta was checking the ship's power systems when the alarm started screaming. The insect-like Kethari had 4 arms and compound eyes that could see many different types of light. Right now, those eyes were wide with fear. Captain, Klixta's voice clicked and buzzed with panic. Massive energy signatures approaching. Multiple contacts! Captain Velthar rushed to the sensor station. What she saw there made her crystal body turn cold. Dozens of huge objects were moving toward them through space. Each one was the size of a small moon. What are they? She whispered. The answer came too quickly. The objects moved closer, and the ship's computers finally got a clear look at them. What the crew saw made them all freeze in terror. The ships were alive. Not alive like the peaceful creatures they knew, but alive in a wrong, horrible way. Metal and flesh were mixed together in patterns that hurt to look at. Massive tentacles reached out from the front of each ship, grabbing space dust and small rocks and pulling them inside huge mouths, lined with spinning metal teeth. Devourers, Zithara whispered. By the ancient light, they're really devourers. Everyone on the bridge knew the stories. The Devourers were monsters from the old tales, machines that ate everything they found. Planets, stars, entire solar systems. Nothing was safe from their hunger. Most people thought they were just scary stories told to children, but here they were, real and terrible and coming closer. How many? Captain Velthar asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. 47 large ships, Klixta reported, and hundreds of smaller ones. Captain, their weapons are charging. The first attack came without warning. A beam of red energy shot out from the lead Devourer ship and hit the Whispered Dawn. The beautiful hull cracked and burning air rushed out into space. The ship shook so hard that everyone was thrown to the floor. Shields at 30%, Klixta shouted over the noise of alarms. Hull breach on deck 5. Captain Velthar pulled herself up and tried to think. Their ship was built for exploration, not fighting. The Concordat had been peaceful for so long that most ships didn't even have real weapons. The Whispered Dawn had only basic defensive systems. Another energy beam hit them and the lights went out for a few seconds. We can't fight them, Zithara said. We need to run. The engines are damaged, Klixta reported. We can't go faster than half speed. Captain Velthar looked at the display showing the Devourer ships. They were getting closer and more energy beams were charging. She knew they had only minutes before the Whispered Dawn was destroyed. Send a distress signal, she ordered. Full power, all frequencies. But Captain, Zithara said, we're too far from Concordat space. No one will hear us in time. Do it anyway, she replied. It's our only chance. Klixta's 4 hands moved quickly over the communication controls. The distress signal went out in all directions, carrying a message in every language the Concordat knew. This is Captain Velthar of the research vessel Whispered Dawn. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. Repeat, we are under attack. Any ships in the area, please respond. We have important archaeological data that must not be lost. The signal traveled through space at the speed of light. racing away from the dying ship. It passed empty star systems and cold planets where no one lived. For a while, it seemed like the signal would fade away without being heard. But at the very edge of the quarantine zone, where the Concordat had put warning beacons around dangerous star systems, the signal was picked up by automated listening posts. These posts had been watching the quarantine zone for hundreds of years, making sure nothing dangerous came out. The listening posts recorded the signal and sent it deeper into the quarantine zone, to planets that the Concordat feared to visit, to worlds where the Deathworlders lived. Back on the Whispered Dawn, another attack from the Devourers knocked out the main power systems. Emergency lights cast strange shadows on the bridge as the crew tried to keep their ship alive for a few more minutes. "Signal sent," Clickster reported, "but I don't think anyone will come in time." Through the view screen, they could see the Devourer ships getting closer. The aliens watched in horror as the mechanical mouths opened and closed, already tasting the metal they were about to eat. Captain Velthar stood as straight as she could and prepared to face death with dignity. Her people believed that how you died was as important as how you lived. She would not show fear, even at the end. "All crew, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's communication system. "It has been an honor to serve with you. May the ancient light guide us home." The Devourers moved closer, their weapons charging for the final attack. In a few more seconds, the Whispered Dawn and everyone on it would be nothing but scattered atoms in space. But somewhere in the dark between the stars, something was listening. Something that the peaceful Concordat had locked away because they were too afraid of what it might do. The Deathworlders had heard their call. Admiral Sarah Chen was drinking her morning coffee when the universe changed forever. She sat in her office aboard the space station Terra Nova, looking out at the blue and green planet Earth spinning slowly below. The coffee was real, grown in the agricultural domes of Luna Colony, and it tasted like home. Earth had been locked away from the rest of the galaxy for 300 years. The alien governments called it a quarantine, but Sarah knew it was really a prison. The Galactic Concordat was afraid of humans. They thought people from Earth were too violent, too dangerous to be allowed into civilized space. Sarah understood why they were scared. Humans came from a world that tried to kill them every day. Earth had earthquakes, hurricanes, diseases, and predators. Most alien worlds were peaceful gardens compared to the nightmare planet that created humanity. But being dangerous and being evil were not the same thing. The communication alert made her look up from her coffee. Lieutenant Rodriguez, a young man with serious dark eyes, knocked on her door. "Admiral, we're getting something strange from the listening posts," he said. "It's a distress signal, but it's not from any human ship." Sarah put down her coffee and followed Rodriguez to the command center. The Terra Nova was the headquarters of the Terran Defense Coalition, humanity's military force. Unlike the beautiful alien ships she had seen in old videos, human ships were built like fortresses. They had thick armor, heavy weapons, and redundant systems. When humans built something, they built it to survive. The command center was full of activity. Dozens of technicians worked at control stations, monitoring the space around Earth and the other human colonies. Large screens showed the positions of human ships throughout the solar system. "Play the signal," Sarah ordered. The alien voice filled the room, speaking in a language that sounded like crystal chimes mixed with wind. The computer translated the words into English, but Sarah could hear the fear in the original voice. "This is Captain Velthar of the research vessel Whispered Dawn. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. Repeat, we are under attack. Any ships in the area, please respond. We have important archaeological data that must not be lost." Sarah listened to the message 3 times. Each time she heard something that made her stomach feel cold. The alien captain mentioned unknown hostile forces. In Sarah's experience, when peaceful people called something unknown and hostile, it usually meant something very bad was happening. "Where did this come from?" she asked. "The outer listening post picked it up," Rodriguez replied. "It's coming from the galactic rim about 40 light-years from here, right at the edge of the quarantine zone." Sarah looked at the star map. The signal was coming from empty space, far from any Concordat worlds. What was an alien research ship doing out there? And what could be attacking them that they would call unknown hostile forces? "Run the signal through the military analysis computer," she ordered. "I want to know everything about these attackers." The computer worked for several minutes, comparing the aliens' description to every threat scenario in the human military database. Humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing for every possible enemy they could imagine. When you lived in a quarantine, you had to be ready for anything. The results made Sarah's blood run cold. "Admiral," Rodriguez said quietly, "the computer thinks they're describing devourers." Everyone in the command center stopped what they were doing. Devourers were the nightmare scenario that kept military planners awake at night. Ancient machines that ate everything they found, turning matter into more copies of themselves. Earth's war colleges had spent decades studying old alien records about them, trying to figure out how to fight something like that. The aliens thought devourers were just scary stories. Humans treated them as a real threat to prepare for. "How certain is the computer?" Sarah asked. 87% match, Rodriguez replied. "Mechanical life forms, energy weapons, consumption patterns." "It's them, Admiral." Sarah stared at the star map. Somewhere out there, aliens were dying while machines ate their ship. The Concordat had locked humanity away because they thought humans were monsters. But real monsters were destroying an innocent research crew, and only the dangerous humans were close enough to help. "Send a message to Fleet Command," Sarah ordered. "Priority Alpha. Possible devourer contact in Sector 779. Request immediate response authorization." The message would take 30 minutes to reach Earth and get an answer. Sarah knew what the politicians would say. Humans were supposed to stay in the quarantine zone. Getting involved with alien problems would upset the delicate peace treaty. But Sarah also knew what the right thing to do was. "Rodriguez, start preparing a response fleet," she said. "I want the Indomitable Will and her escort group ready to move in 1 hour." "Admiral, we don't have authorization yet," Rodriguez said carefully. Sarah looked at him. "Those aliens are going to be dead in 1 hour. We can ask for permission or we can ask for forgiveness. Which do you think will bring them back to life?" Rodriguez smiled. "I'll get the fleet ready, ma'am." The Indomitable Will was humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Unlike the graceful alien vessels, she looked like what she was, a weapon designed to fight impossible odds. Her hull was dark gray and covered with armor plates. Missile launchers and energy weapons stuck out from her sides like the spines of some dangerous animal. Captain Maria Santos received the alert while she was reviewing training reports. She was a small woman with black hair and scars on her hands from years of military service. Like most human officers, she had grown up hearing stories about the galaxy beyond the quarantine zone. She had always wondered what it would be like to meet real aliens. She had not expected the first meeting to happen during a battle. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's communication system. "We have received a distress signal from an alien vessel under attack. We are moving to assist." This is not a drill. The crew of the Indomitable Will had trained for this moment their entire careers. They were soldiers from a world that created warriors, sailors from a species that had learned to fight the ocean itself. When the alarm sounded, they moved with the speed and precision of a machine built for war. In the fighter bays, pilots climbed into their attack craft. These ships were small and fast, designed to get close to the enemy and cause as much damage as possible. Human fighter pilots were trained to ram enemy ships if they ran out of weapons. The aliens would have called this crazy. Humans called it tactics. In the weapon systems, gunners loaded the railguns with solid metal slugs that could punch through a mountain. The laser cannons charged up with enough power to cut a ship in half. The missile tubes filled with warheads designed to crack open asteroids. Admiral Sarah Chen watched from the command center as the human fleet prepared for war. 12 ships total, the Indomitable Will, 6 destroyers, 3 cruisers, and 2 support vessels. Not a large fleet by human standards, but every ship was built to fight enemies that outnumbered them. "Fleet reports ready for departure," Rodriguez announced. Sarah thought about the politicians on Earth who would be angry about this decision. She thought about the aliens who had locked humanity away out of fear. Then she thought about the research crew somewhere in space waiting to die while machines ate their ship. "Launch the fleet," she ordered, "and may God help us all." The human ships disappeared into hyperspace, racing toward a battle that would change the galaxy forever. Behind them, Earth continued to spin peacefully, unaware that its children were about to become heroes in a war they never wanted to fight. In the depths of space, the distress signal from the Whispered Dawn continued to broadcast, growing weaker as the ship's power failed. But now it was not alone in the darkness. Humanity was coming, bringing all the violence and courage that had kept them alive on their deadly world. The Deathworlders were going to war. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace into chaos. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Will, staring at the battle scene through the main view screen. What she saw made her jaw clench with anger. The alien research ship was dying. The beautiful white hull was broken in dozens of places, leaking air and debris into space. Around it moved creatures that looked like nightmares made real. The Devourer ships were massive, twisted combinations of metal and flesh that hurt to look at. Tentacles writhed from their fronts, grabbing pieces of the broken ship and feeding them into mouths full of spinning teeth. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Parker from the weapons station. "Those things are eating them alive." Captain Santos had seen combat before. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belt and put down rebellions on the outer colonies. But this was different. This was not war between people who disagreed. This was extermination. "All ships, battle formation Omega," she ordered over the fleet communication channel. "Target the large vessels first. We need to get those aliens out of there." The human ships spread out into attack formation. Unlike the elegant alien vessels, they moved like predators circling their prey. The Indomitable Will led the charge, her dark hull bristling with weapons. On the bridge of the dying whispered dawn, Captain Velthar watched in amazement as new ships appeared on her sensors. At first she thought they might be more Devourers, but these ships looked different. They were smaller than the Devourer vessels, but something about them seemed more dangerous. "Captain," Science Officer Zithara called out, his voice weak from blood loss. "The new ships are broadcasting on concordant frequencies. They're trying to communicate with us." The message that came through the radio was in perfect galactic standard, but the voice speaking it was unlike anything the aliens had ever heard. It was rough and hard, like rocks grinding together. "Alien vessel, this is Captain Maria Santos of the Terran ship Indomitable Will. We received your distress signal. Hold on, we're coming to get you out of there." "Terran?" Captain Velthar whispered. "That's impossible. The Terrans are locked in the quarantine zone." She had heard of Terrans, the violent species from the death world called Earth. The Concordat had declared them too dangerous for civilization and locked them away centuries ago. What were they doing here? The answer came in the form of violence that shocked the aliens to their cores. The human ships opened fire all at once. Streams of laser light cut through space, followed by solid metal slugs moving at incredible speed. The humans did not fire elegant energy beams like civilized species. They threw chunks of metal hard enough to crack mountains. One of the smaller Devourer ships exploded when a railgun slug punched completely through it. Another started spinning out of control when laser fire cut off its forward tentacles. The mechanical monsters turned toward this new threat, their weapons charging, but the humans were not done. As the Devourers fired back, small ships launched from the human vessels. These fighter craft moved like angry wasps, too fast for the big weapons to hit. They swarmed around the Devourer ships, firing missiles and laser cannons at close range. Captain Santos watched the battle with cold satisfaction. Her people had trained for this kind of fight their whole lives. When you came from a world that wanted to kill you, you learned to be very good at killing back. "Boarding teams, prepare for assault," she ordered. "We're going to get those aliens out of there." "Ma'am," Lieutenant Parker said, "the alien ship is heavily damaged. Our shuttles might not be able to dock safely." Captain Santos smiled grimly. Who said anything about docking? Sergeant Mike Torres had seen action on 3 different worlds, but he had never tried to board a ship that was being eaten by space monsters. He stood in the shuttle bay with 20 other Marines, checking his armor and weapons one last time. Human military gear was built for the worst conditions imaginable. The armor could survive in the vacuum of space underwater or in the middle of a volcano. The weapons could kill anything from a human terrorist to a Martian sandworm. Torres carried a rifle that could punch holes through tank armor, and he knew how to use it. "Listen up," he called to his team. "The alien ship is dying, and there are civilians on board who need our help. We're going to cut our way in, grab whoever we can find, and get them out." "Questions?" Private Johnson raised her hand. "Sarge, what if the aliens don't want to come with us? I mean, we're supposed to be the bad guys, right?" Torres considered this. The Concordat had spent centuries telling everyone that humans were monsters. The aliens they were about to rescue might be more afraid of their rescuers than of the things trying to eat them. "Then we carry them," he said simply. "Nobody gets left behind." The shuttle Iron Eagle launched from the indomitable Will and flew straight toward the damaged alien ship. The pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, had to dodge pieces of flying debris and energy beams from the Devourer weapons. Human pilots were trained to fly through asteroid fields and solar storms. A simple space battle was just another day at the office. 30 seconds to contact, she announced. Sergeant Torres and his team stood ready by the shuttle's airlock. Instead of trying to dock with the alien ship, they were going to cut a hole in the hull and go in through the wound. It was not elegant, but it would work. The shuttle slammed into the side of the Whispered Dawn with enough force to crack both hulls. Immediately, the Marines fired up their cutting torches and began melting through the alien metal. In 60 seconds, they had created a hole big enough to climb through. Torres was the first one through the gap. He found himself in a corridor that looked like it had been designed by artists instead of engineers. The walls were covered with beautiful patterns that glowed softly in the emergency lighting. It was the prettiest place he had ever seen, and it was dying. "Spread out," he ordered. "Look for survivors." The Marines moved through the ship like ghosts. Their armor muffled the sound of their footsteps, and their weapons stayed ready for trouble. They found the first aliens 2 levels up from their entry point. 3 creatures were trapped in what looked like a medical bay. One was made of living crystal, one looked like flowing water, and one was some kind of insect with 4 arms. All of them were injured, and all of them screamed when they saw the armored humans. "Easy," Torres said, pulling off his helmet so they could see his face. "We're here to help." The crystal alien said something in a musical language that Torres could not understand. His translator computer worked for a few seconds, then provided a rough translation. "She says we are death demons from the cursed worlds," the computer announced in its flat electronic voice. Torres sighed. This was going to be complicated. "Tell her we received their distress signal," he said to the computer. "Tell her we're going to get them off this ship before it explodes." The computer translated his words. The aliens looked at each other with expressions that Torres could not read. Finally, the crystal one spoke again. "She asks why we would help them," the computer translated. Torres thought about this question. Why were humans risking their lives to save aliens who had locked them away? Why were they fighting monsters to protect people who feared them? "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. The aliens did not understand the translation, but something in Torres's voice seemed to convince them. When he gestured toward the hole his team had cut, they followed him without further argument. Getting back to the shuttle was harder than getting in. The ship was falling apart around them, and pieces of the hull kept breaking off and floating away. Torres had to carry the insect alien, who was too injured to move quickly. Private Johnson helped the water being, while Corporal Martinez guided the crystal alien. Just as they reached the shuttle, another Devourer energy beam hit the Whispered Dawn. The beautiful research ship finally broke in half, spilling its contents into space. Torres shoved the aliens into the shuttle and dove in after them just as Lieutenant Kim fired the engines. "All aboard," he reported to Captain Santos. 3 survivors recovered. As the shuttle flew back toward the indomitable Will, Torres looked out the window at the battle still raging around them. Human ships were fighting creatures from everyone's worst nightmares, and they were winning. The Devourers were powerful, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to give up. The aliens sat in the shuttle's passenger bay, staring at their human rescuers with wide eyes. They had been saved by the very monsters their government had warned them about. These death demons had risked their lives to protect people they had never met before. Captain Velthar looked at Sergeant Torres and realized something that would change everything. The humans were not monsters. They were guardians, and the galaxy was going to need them more than anyone knew. Outside the shuttle, the battle continued. But for the first time in hours, the Whispered Dawn's crew had hope. The Deathworlders had come to save them, and nothing in the universe could stop them now. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the war room aboard the Terra Nova, staring at a holographic map of the galaxy that was covered with red warning symbols. Each symbol represented a Devourer fleet, and there were too many to count. What had started as a rescue mission was turning into the biggest threat the galaxy had ever faced. "How many?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Over 3,000 large vessels," reported Commander Jackson, the head of military intelligence. "Maybe 10,000 smaller ones. They're moving in 17 different directions, all heading toward populated systems." Sarah felt sick. The attack on the research ship had not been random. It had been a scouting mission. The Devourers had been looking for signs of intelligent life, and now they knew where to find it. Time until they reached the first concordate worlds? 72 hours, Jackson replied. The closest target is the Vethka colony at Christhaven. Population 4 million. 4 million peaceful aliens who had never seen real war. 4 million people who would be eaten alive by machines that felt no mercy. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to think of a solution, but the numbers were impossible. What about the Concordate Navy? She asked. Commander Jackson shook his head. They have maybe 200 ships total, spread across 50 star systems. Most of them are exploration vessels with light weapons. They're not built for this kind of fighting. Sarah looked at the map again. The Concordate had been peaceful for so long that they had forgotten how to make war. Their ships were beautiful and efficient, designed for science and trade. The Devourers would go through them like a knife through paper. Ma'am, Lieutenant Rodriguez interrupted. We're getting communications from the Concordate High Council. They want to talk. The main screen flickered to life, showing a chamber full of alien beings. Sarah recognized some of the species from the old diplomatic files. There were crystal Vethka, flowing Zephyrians, and insect-like Cathari. All of them looked terrified. The speaker was an elderly Vethka whose crystal body pulsed with nervous light. When he spoke, his words were translated into English by the computer systems. Admiral Chen, he said, I am Council Chairman Thelvorin. We have received reports of your fleet's engagement with the hostile forces. We must protest your violation of the quarantine treaty. Sarah stared at the screen in disbelief. You're worried about treaty violations? Your people are about to be slaughtered. The quarantine exists for good reasons, another council member said. This one was a tall, thin being that looked like it was made of living smoke. Humans are too violent, too dangerous. Your presence in our space threatens the peace. There is no peace, Sarah said flatly. There are machines eating your colonies, and you're worried about paperwork. The council members looked at each other nervously. Finally, Chairman Thelvorin spoke again. We have reviewed the threat assessment. Our military advisors believe the hostile forces can be contained with proper defensive measures. We do not require assistance from your kind. Sarah felt her temper rising. These aliens would rather die than accept help from humans. 3 centuries of prejudice and fear had made them blind to reality. Your military advisors are wrong, she said. I've seen the intelligence reports. The Devourers have over 3,000 ships. You have 200. Do the math. We will not allow Deathworlders into Concordate space, another council member declared. The risk is too great. Sarah was about to respond when alarms started screaming throughout the command center. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from his station with a pale face. Admiral, we're getting distress signals from the Christhaven system. Multiple contacts, massive energy signatures. The Devourers have arrived. The main screen switched to a view from long-range sensors. The Christhaven system had been beautiful, with a blue-green world surrounded by crystal orbital stations. Now it was a battlefield. Devourer ships swarmed around the planet like hungry insects, their weapons tearing apart the defensive platforms. The Concordate ships in the system tried to fight back, but it was hopeless. Their elegant energy weapons barely scratched the Devourer hulls. One by one, the beautiful ships were torn apart and consumed. Sarah watched a Concordate cruiser try to ram a Devourer vessel in a desperate final attack. The collision destroyed the alien ship instantly, but the Devourer just grew new parts to replace what had been damaged. In less than an hour, 4 million innocent people would be dead. Admiral, came a new voice from the communication system. This one was different from the council members, younger and more urgent. This is Captain Velthar of the research vessel, whispered Dawn. I am speaking from your ship, Indomitable Will. Sarah looked at the screen. The crystal alien who had been rescued by her Marines was standing in what looked like a human medical bay. Her body was covered with bandages and repair patches, but her eyes were clear and determined. Captain Velthar, Sarah said, you should be resting. There is no time for rest, Velthar replied. I have seen what these machines can do. I have also seen what your people can do. The council is wrong. We need your help. Chairman Thelvorin's crystal body flashed with angry light. Captain Velthar, you are not authorized to speak for the Concordate. Return to your assigned duties immediately. My assigned duties were to explore ancient ruins, Velthar said firmly. My new duty is to keep my people alive. Admiral Chen, will you help us? Sarah looked at the map showing the advancing Devourer fleets. She thought about the peaceful aliens who would die because their leaders were too proud to accept help. She thought about the human crews who would die fighting a war they had not started. Then she thought about 4 million people on a crystal world who had maybe an hour left to live. All ships. This is Admiral Chen, she announced over the fleet communication channel. We are moving to assist Concordate forces at Christhaven. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Show these machines what happens when they threaten innocent people. The Terran Defense Coalition fleet jumped into hyperspace, racing toward a battle they could not win. Behind them, the Concordate Council continued to argue about treaty violations and proper procedures while their people died. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Will as they dropped out of hyperspace at Christhaven. What she saw there made her blood run cold. The crystal world was burning. Devourer ships hung in orbit like metal vultures feeding on the remains of the orbital stations. All fighters launch, she ordered. Target the ships attacking the planet. Everything else is secondary. Human fighter craft swarmed out of the fleet carriers, their pilots ready to die for people they had never met. The Devourers turned their attention to this new threat, but they had never faced enemies like these before. Lieutenant Commander Jake Wolverine Morrison dove his fighter toward a Devourer ship that was the size of a city. His weapons could barely scratch its hull, but that was not the point. He was buying time for the evacuation ships to reach the planet's surface. This is Wolverine to all fighters, he announced over the radio. Remember, we're not here to win. We're here to give those people a chance to run. The battle for Christhaven lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the human fleet had lost 4 ships and 200 fighters. The Devourer fleet was still mostly intact, but they had saved 3.5 million aliens from the burning world. As the evacuation ships carried refugees away from their destroyed home, Captain Velthar stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Will and watched her people's world die. Everything she had ever known was gone, eaten by machines that cared nothing for beauty or art or life itself. I'm sorry we couldn't save your world, Captain Santos said quietly. Velthar's crystal body pulsed with sad light. You saved my people. That is what matters. She turned to look at the human captain. The Council still thinks they can fight this war without you. They are wrong. The Devourers will not stop until everything is consumed. You are the only ones who can stand against them. Captain Santos nodded. Then that's what we'll do. Across the galaxy, more distress signals were starting to arrive. The Devourer War had begun, and the peaceful Concordate was learning what humans had always known. Sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to become something terrible yourself. The Deathworlders were going to teach the galaxy how to survive. The final battle for the galaxy began at Veth Prime, the crystal capital of the Concordate. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the massive space station Ragnarok, watching as enemy contacts filled every screen. The Devourers had gathered their entire fleet for this assault, over 4,000 ships that blotted out the stars. Status report, she ordered, though she already knew how bad things were. Devourer main fleet in position around the system star, reported Commander Jackson. They're beginning the consumption process. Estimated time until stellar collapse 8 hours. Sarah nodded grimly. The monsters were not just planning to destroy Veth Prime. They were going to eat the sun itself, turning its mass into more Devourer ships. When they were done, this entire system would be nothing but empty space. What about our fleet? All available ships are in position, Jackson replied. Terran Defense Coalition, Martian Colonial Navy, Asteroid Belt Mining Guild, and... He paused, checking his readings again. Ma'am, we're getting more contacts. A lot more. The tactical display updated, showing dozens of new ships dropping out of hyperspace. But these were not the sleek human vessels everyone expected. These ships were crude and angular, covered with spikes and armor plates. Some looked like they had been built inside asteroids. Others appeared to be made from the shells of enormous space creatures. Saurian battle fleet has arrived, announced a voice over the communication channel. The speaker's words were translated from a language that sounded like rocks falling down a mountain. We heard there was a good fight here. More ships appeared. Ice-covered vessels from the frozen world of Fenris. Massive industrial ships from the forge world of Vulcanus. Even a few organic vessels from the jungle world of Verdania. Their living hulls pulsing with alien life. Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. The Deathworlder Alliance had come to fight. For 3 centuries, the Concordate had locked away every species they considered too dangerous for civilization. Humans were just one of many races that had been quarantined on their homeworlds. But humans had not been idle during those years. They had made contact with their fellow prisoners, forming alliances with other species that the galaxy feared. "All Deathworlder forces, this is Admiral Chen," she announced. "Welcome to the party." "Greetings, small human," replied the Saurian commander. The reptilian species from the high-gravity world of Draconis had been fighting wars since before humans discovered fire. "We bring gifts of violence and destruction. The ice remembers," added the Fenrari fleet commander in their musical language. The Arctic wolves had evolved on a world locked in eternal winter, where only the strongest survived. "We hunt as one pack." More voices joined the communication channel. The Vulcani, who had turned their volcanic world into the galaxy's greatest weapons factory. The Verdani, whose plant-based civilization could grow new ships from seeds. The Kraken, whose water world had produced the galaxy's most feared naval fighters. All of them were species the Concordat had deemed too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous for polite society. And all of them were here to protect the people who had locked them away. Captain Velthar stood on the bridge of the indomitable Will, staring at the massive fleet assembling around her. She had never seen so many warships in one place. The human vessels looked like floating fortresses. The Saurian ships bristled with enough weapons to level mountains. The Fenrari icebreakers moved like hunting wolves through the void. "Why are they here?" she asked Captain Santos. "Your people owe us nothing. We imprisoned you, feared you, called you monsters. Why risk your lives for us?" Captain Santos was quiet for a moment. "Because that's what good people do," she said finally. "We protect those who cannot protect themselves, even if they hate us for it." The battle began when the first Devourer scouts reached the outer planets. They found the Deathworlder fleet waiting for them, and the galaxy learned what real war looked like. The Saurian ships charged straight at the enemy like ancient cavalry, their ramming prows designed to crack open asteroid hulls. When they collided with Devourer vessels, the impacts could be seen from orbit. Reptilian boarding parties fought their way through mechanical intestines with claws and teeth and weapons that shot molten rock. The Fenrari hunted in coordinated packs, their ice ships moving too fast for the big Devourer weapons to track. They struck at weak points and vital systems, then vanished into the darkness before the enemy could respond. Their crews fought with the patience of hunters who had learned to wait months for the perfect moment to strike. The humans used tactics that horrified and inspired everyone watching. When Devourer tentacles grabbed human ships, the human crews activated self-destruct charges, taking their enemies with them. When human fighters ran out of ammunition, their pilots rammed their craft into enemy weak points. The aliens in the Concordat had never seen warriors who were willing to die to save strangers, but the Devourers were not helpless. They had consumed entire civilizations, learned from every species they had destroyed. For every Deathworlder ship that fell, they adapted and grew stronger. "Admiral, we're losing," Commander Jackson reported. "Devourer main fleet is breaking through our defensive line." Sarah watched the battle display with cold calculation. The Deathworlders were fighting harder than any military force in galactic history, but there were simply too many enemies. They needed something that would change the entire battle in one move. "Jackson, how long until they finish consuming the star?" 6 hours, ma'am. "And how long would it take to destabilize a stellar core using our Nova bombs?" Jackson's face went pale. "Admiral, you can't be serious. A forced Nova would destroy everything in this system." "Everything except ships with FTL drives," Sarah pointed out. "We evacuate everyone to safe distance, detonate the star, and take out the entire Devourer fleet at once." "Ma'am, the Concordat population centers are still in system. Millions of people on the orbital habitats and moon colonies. We can't evacuate them all in time." Sarah stared at the tactical display. They were losing the war, and desperate times called for desperate measures. But she was not willing to sacrifice millions of innocents to win a battle. "Then we do this the hard way," she decided. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We're going to finish this fight the way Deathworlders always do. We're going to get up close and personal." The order went out across the Allied fleet. All remaining ships ramming speed. Target the Devourer command vessels. What happened next would be remembered as the most heroic and terrible moment in galactic history. Every ship in the Deathworlder Alliance turned toward the largest Devourer vessels and accelerated to maximum speed. They were not trying to win a strategic victory. They were trying to hurt the enemy so badly that the survivors would think twice about attacking anyone ever again. Captain Santos stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Will as her ship dove toward a Devourer command vessel the size of a moon. Her crew was already in the escape pods, launched toward the evacuation ships. Only she remained, her hand on the manual controls. "This is Captain Santos to Admiral Chen," she reported calmly. "Beginning final attack run. It's been an honor to serve." The Indomitable Will struck the Devourer command ship at a significant fraction of light speed. The explosion could be seen from 3 star systems away. When the light faded, both ships were gone, replaced by an expanding cloud of superheated plasma. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Saurian battleships rammed Devourer carriers, their crews roaring ancient war chants as they died. Fenrari icebreakers dove into Devourer power cores, their hulls melting from the heat as they triggered chain explosions. Human destroyers punched through mechanical armor to detonate their nuclear warheads inside enemy ships. The Devourers had never faced an enemy that refused to surrender, refused to run, refused to accept defeat. They were machines built to consume and expand, not to fight wars of mutual annihilation. As their losses mounted, something like panic began to spread through their collective intelligence. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourers retreated. Captain Velthar watched from the evacuation ship as the surviving Devourer fleet fled into deep space. The battle was over, but the cost had been terrible. Over half the Deathworlder Alliance fleet was gone, along with thousands of brave souls who had died to protect people they barely knew. "Why?" she asked Admiral Chen, who had survived when her command ship's bridge was evacuated at the last moment. "Why did you sacrifice so much for us?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Because someone has to stand between the darkness and the light," she said finally. "Because the strong protect the weak, not because they have to, but because they choose to." She looked out at the stars, where Deathworlder ships were already organizing search and rescue operations for survivors. "Your people called us monsters," she continued. "Maybe you were right, but we're your monsters now, and we'll be watching the darkness, making sure nothing like this ever happens again." In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. The quarantine zones were dissolved, and the Deathworlder species became the Concordate's protectors. Human children played with alien youngsters on 100 different worlds. Saurian engineers helped rebuild destroyed colonies. Fenrari scouts patrolled the galactic rim, watching for new threats.